All right, yeah, I'm so stoked to be giving this talk. I'm really excited to talk to the Illinois Extension Forestry community. I've got a lot of information to share with you today. People always tell me in my talks when I update everybody on what we're finding in Illinois are doom and gloom. And so I like to not only provide you with what the ticks we're finding and the disease agents we're finding in them, but also with some information about how you can prevent tick bites and reduce tick-borne diseases and tick encounters. So I'll give an introduction today, a brief intro on why we're doing all of this, why I'm here. And then I'll give you some information on tick biology and best practices for bite prevention. I'll briefly go over the surveillance program that we have at the Illinois Natural History Survey Medical Entomology Lab. And then I will talk about some of those tick-borne disease agents and ticks that we're finding that are of greatest human health concern in Illinois. Please, if you have questions, as Chris indicated, put them in the chat box and we'll try to get to all of them. Today, I'm going to leave at least 15 minutes at the end of the talk so we could all just have a nice informal discussion. If we don't get to your question, though, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. I'm still learning how to use that. So, and you can also just email me, htuten@Illinois, and I'll have that on the last slide. Right. So, tick-borne diseases have been on a steady increase in the United States. We know that about 80% of vector-borne diseases that occur in the US right now are tick-borne. Now, that doesn't mean that there are more tick-borne disease, there's more tick-borne disease risk necessarily, but it does mean that maybe we've got more control and effort directed towards mosquitoes. And so we all need to be thinking maybe about how we could do that with ticks too. We've seen several new tick-borne diseases emerge in the last 10 years. As we continue to disturb environments, as temperatures continue to change, as we see extreme weather events, we will see potential increases of those of tick-borne diseases, new ones emerging, the ones that we have increasing. And so it behooves all of us to know how to prevent tick bites and keep them away from where we like to stay and play. We do have tick-borne diseases in Illinois. Originally, it was thought that when we had Lyme cases in Illinois, it was people who had traveled out of state, and then when they got back, they got sick. But since the turn of the century, evidence from both human cases and also from detections of the disease agent that causes Lyme directly in ticks collected in Illinois tell us that the disease agent that causes Lyme is present in Illinois ticks. The tick vectors, which are the black-legged ticks, sometimes called deer ticks, are present in Illinois, and I'll show you some maps of where we're finding them later on in the talk. And cases have been increasing in the last 2 decades. We also see a seasonal periodicity to human Lyme disease reports in Illinois. So typically what we see is this peak in case reporting in late spring and early summer, and then decreases towards the winter, but people can still contract Lyme in the winter. Black-legged ticks can still be active in the winter. Same with another disease that's been considered one of the more prevalent ones in Illinois, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. It has also been increasing since the turn of the century. And it also has a seasonal periodicity. So we see those late spring, early summer highs and the winter troughs. However, just a little teaser for later on in the talk, it might not actually be Rocky Mountain spotted fever. It might not be that disease agent in the ticks. It might be a close relative in the spotted fever group. We also see variation in where people are getting sick with different tick-borne diseases in Illinois, indicating that we have a landscape of varying risk in the state. Now, this is just 2 of the diseases. We are finding agents of other diseases, And there's information at the Illinois Department of Public Health website on all of these. So you can see that if we're looking at the number of cases, the number of human cases per 100,000 people, if the color's darker, that means there's more cases. This is summed up from 2010 to 2019. Some nice new maps that IDPH got up in the last 6 months. So you can see that we've got more people apparently contracting Lyme in northern Illinois, and then more people contracting spotted fevers in southern Illinois. And this actually fits with what we're seeing in the ticks as well. And I'll show you more about that later. Okay, but before I get into ticks and the disease agents we're finding in them, I actually want to start here at the top of the talk with how you can prevent tick bites and respond to them. So very briefly, the ticks that are of the greatest human health concern in Illinois are known as the 3-host hard ticks. This is one life strategy that ticks have. 3-host hard ticks are very effective vectors of disease agents. And part of the reason is because they have 4 life stages. They go from egg to larva to nymph to adult. And they require a blood meal from a new host before each of those mobile life stages. And then also before laying eggs. So the eggs hatch into larvae, and then those larvae will take a blood meal. The larvae molt to nymphs, and those nymphs will take a blood meal. And the nymphs molt to adults, and those adults will take a blood meal. In some species, both males and females. In others, just the female. And then the female will lay eggs after mating. So each new host blood meal is an opportunity for that 3-host hard tick to acquire or transmit a disease agent. So where are ticks? Ticks face 2 great constraints in life. They have to prevent drying out, and they have to find blood hosts. They'll quest on grass, shrubs, or close to the ground and leaf litter. And that's when they're actively looking for a host. But then they spend quite a bit of time resting in the duff. That's the layer below the leaf litter. They tend to be found in microclimates with elevated humidity, areas with thick understory with canopy cover, the sides of trails, in grassy areas, usually within 40 meters of the edge of the wood, inside or outside the wood. And then we do have one exception, and I'm going to talk about the Gulf Coast tick later. We are finding it at a much higher occurrence than we originally suspected in Illinois. And that one actually, the Gulf Coast tick can be found in open prairies, fallow fields, roadside ditches. So it's not necessarily the tick habitat we usually think about. It can be sunny, it can be full sun, middle of the day, and they're still out there on the grass looking for a host. But ticks are going to be associated with vegetation of some type. So I've got some pictures here to give you a sense of scale and maybe help you look when you're out in the environment. You can see those tick larvae there clustered on grass stalks. And I'm going to show you one technique for potentially dealing with them when you're out in the woods. Some species, the larvae will stay close together like that. And then when you brush by the grass, they'll just transfer as a patch. Looks like a bunch of cedar dust until it starts moving. And then you can see American dog ticks there on grass stalks. And then finally, this is a figure from Kirby Stafford, a fantastic tick biologist at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station. And he asked, well, where do we find most of the ticks? And so after going out and surveying sites, he got these relative percentages of where you would expect. You don't expect too many on a well-trimmed, sunny grass lawn, but you can find some. And then you're getting closer to the edge of the woods and you're finding more, and then you're up in that brush and bramble right at the edge and you find the most. And you'll also find ticks inside the woods, especially black-legged ticks. So ticks, the way that they reach people is actually with two different strategies. So all ticks can sit and wait. So they climb up a grass stalk, wave their forelegs in the air, looking for those cues that tell them a host is coming near. And we are actually doing research at the INHS Medical Entomology Lab right now to figure out what the diversity of these cues are. You know, is it just CO2? Is it radiant heat? But then ticks can also use pursuit. So you see this with Lone Star ticks and Gulf Coast ticks. If you look over at the right there, inside that yellow box, I'm about to hit go, and you're gonna see an adult female Lone Star tick come up out of the leaf litter. She's got a bright white dot on her back, and you're gonna see her running around. She was running for me. Here we go. Hello, there she is. Crawling on top of a leaf. Trying to find me. And also these pursuit ticks, sometimes they could just hang out in the soil. They're not on grass, they're not even on leaves. This is a video I took of some Lone Star tick nymphs in Grundy County running up my boots out of the soil. I couldn't pass up this opportunity to get the creepiest video I've ever taken. You're gonna see them moving, and then I'll highlight where they are. And then you'll see how one of the techniques that we use can prevent them from passing the top of my boots. So you can see them running now. There's 3. This is how fast they move in real time. There's more. Now we've got 8. And ticks crawl up. In my case, ticks crawl up to the double-sided carpet tape on my boots. You're gonna see all 8 get trapped. 1, 2. They don't know what they're doing. Here we go. 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8. Double-sided carpet tape stops them. So, you know, we run a statewide tick surveillance program at the INHS Medical Entomology Lab, and that essentially means that we have to go out into the habitats where we think we're going to encounter a lot of ticks. Sometimes knowing those ticks could carry devastating pathogens. And so I'm very, very strict about our personal protection. I don't want anybody on my crew to get bit. And to break it down for you, I'm going to go over each one of these. When I am out doing my tick surveillance, but also when I'm out hiking with my children, I employ 4 layers of protection. Managing the tick-human interface is critical. No matter how sophisticated our control methods get, no matter how much we understand about the environment, we are likely always going to have to manage the moments when humans and ticks encounter each other. And in our tick crew, we do that with chemical, behavioral, physical, and environmental protection. And now I'll go through each one of those. So chemical protection is the foundation of my tick bite prevention plan, both at work and with my family and children. Before we get into any specifics though, I really want to stress that every time you buy a new bottle of repellent or acaricides, which actually kill them, read the label. Sometimes formulations change and there won't be a big announcement about that. And so when you buy that new bottle, make sure you read the label thoroughly in case there's anything new there. I actually noticed recently there were new instructions on my ibuprofen bottle. When you do read that label, make sure that the way you are using these chemicals is followed to the letter. These EPA registered repellents, which are the ones you do want to choose, they've been tested and approved for safety and efficacy. That means they're safe for people, and it means they're effective for repelling ticks, but only if they're followed as the label instructs. The EPA has a really good tool. It's online, and I put the link right there. So you can go in and you can go through a series of questions to figure out what product is right for you. So for instance, are you trying to repel both mosquitoes and ticks? Or are you interested in a product that has a repellent and sunscreen? And so you can go through these questions and figure out what works for you in your situation. In our crew and also at my home, we treat our clothing, shoes, and cloth or leather gear, not rubber, with a formulation of 0.5% permethrin. So this is a chemical, it's a synthetic chemical, but it's very similar to a natural chemical that's found in daisies. And it actually kills ticks. It's a contact repellent, but they can transfer onto clothing that's been treated with permethrin, but they can't walk very far. Eventually they get so irritated, they fall off. And then my favorite part of it is they die. Now we use this 0.5% permethrin that's formulation specifically made for clothing and gear. You can find it online, you can find it at Home Depot or Farm and Fleet or Lowe's, just about anywhere that has an outdoor focus or a big online store, you'll be able to find 0.5% permethrin formulations for clothing and gear. And then we can also use repellents, such as sprays with DEET. And these repel ticks. These can be used in conjunction with permethrin. It's one thing I really like. I can have a couple layers of chemical protection when I take my kids out hiking. Some of these repellents can be used on young children and some cannot. So again, I want to stress when you get those, if you're in the store, you get at home, read the labels, and you can also visit a second EPA site on using insect repellents safely and effectively. And you'll learn everything you need to know about applying repellents to yourself and your family members and friends. One final thing before we leave this slide, permethrin is toxic to cats. We have someone in our crew who has cats and none of the gear goes home with her. So that's something if you do have cats that you might want to read up on. Now, another arm of our 4 layers of protection is physical protection. This picture right here is me and one of my former students, Erica, while we were conducting the Heartland virus investigation for Illinois in 2019. And we were squatting over this white cloth and there was this old guy peering at us through the bushes. And when we eventually emerged, he said, "What are you girls doing out there?" And so we took it as an opportunity for some informal outreach. And when we were done, he looks at us and says, "Well, I'm just going to call you tick busters." And I thought, that's perfect. Yes, that's what that's sticking with me. This is a diagram that outlines all of the different forms of protection that we were using, of physical protection that we were using when we were conducting this investigation of this deadly virus. So we actually use suits that we treat with permethrin, and we put those suits on over athletic clothing when we go out in the woods. You can treat your clothes directly with permethrin, or you could treat a suit with permethrin. I have little suits for my children that I have them wear when we go hiking. You usually want this to be light colored. It makes it much easier to see the ticks, and you also want it to be solid colored. You don't want any patterns because that can disrupt seeing the ticks. And then you make an ascending barrier out of your clothing. It's a physical barrier. Ticks, when they transfer, usually between ankle and thigh high, will stereotypically crawl up. It's the first thing they're going to do. So if you tuck your pants into your calf-high socks and then tuck your shirts into your pants, you'll look like a dork like we do, but you'll be much, much safer than if you did it the opposite way. We also wear snake boots, leather and cloth snake boots. And if it's leather or cloth, it's treated with permethrin. Or sometimes we wear rubber boots, which would not be treated with permethrin. And then about 1 inch below the top of the boot, we use double-sided carpet tape. We stick it directly to the boot. We wrap it around in a solid line so that if any ticks are coming up the boots, it will trap them. You don't have to take that carpet tape off every time. It would be nearly impossible. I just keep putting layers of carpet tape on until it's thick enough to pull off. It works, you know, in 3 years of surveillance with these permethrin treated suits and shoes and bags. We've had no tick bites in the crew in the last 1.5 years. We did have 2 tick bites in the first 1.5 years when we were still kind of fine tuning stuff. And those were both Lone Star nymphs, which are really aggressive biters. I wasn't surprised in the slightest that it was Lone Stars. But this works. Simple physical protection paired with chemical protection. You can also carry a lint roller around with you. Later on in the summer, Lone Star tick larvae will ramp up, and those clumps on the blades of grass I was telling you about, you walk past one, they'll transfer onto your clothes. But if you've got a lint roller with you, I'm going to show you this. So these are some Lone Star tick larvae that I was dragging for ticks, and I picked them up off some grass. You can see them wobbling around there, spreading out from a center. And then I got out my lint roller, and I pulled a sheet off, I slapped it on top of them, and I trapped all of them in the lint roller tape. So it's a very, very, if you find yourself, you look down, you go, oh no, you know, you've got some larvae on you, you can get out that tape or that piece of lint roller paper and just start mashing it down on the larvae and picking them all up. Behavioral protection is another critical element of this. And it starts before you're outdoors. Because behavioral protection, it consists of preparing. So before you even go outdoors, you're going to want to gather any preferred chemical protection that you've gone and you've read the EPA website and you know what you're comfortable with. You want to make sure you've got all that. If you have chosen to use 0.5% permethrin formulated for clothing and gear, on the label, it says that you want to give at least a day before you're actually using it. So you've got to spray it outside and let it dry. I also recommend that you familiarize yourself with whether ticks are present or known at your destination and what habitats they might be found in. And I'm going to show you a resource, a fantastic resource that the Illinois Department of Public Health has in a few minutes. That you can use if you're going to be traveling around Illinois. And you also want to have a plan for what you're going to do if you encounter a tick when you're out in the woods, right? If you're going to go spend a whole day hiking, you know, what if you look down and you see a loose tick crawling on your pants? Are you going to just swipe it off? Do you want to put it in a bag? Do you want to wrap it in tape and throw it away later? You have to make this decision, but just know what you want to do. What would you do if you saw it crawling around between your clothing and your skin, for instance? How would you want to calmly react to that? And then finally, you know, if you've been outside for 4 hours and you feel something itching and you reach up and there's a tick on your neck, how do you want to deal with that when you're in the woods? Behavioral protection also extends to what you do when you arrive at your destination and you want to explore the great outdoors. And so this would be a time to apply repellent before you go in. And then when you are walking in the woods or the fields, we do this during our tick surveillance. We pull our tick drag across the ground for 10 meters. And then every 10 meters, we stop to check our drags. But I require the folks in the crew to check themselves first because they've just been walking through tick habitat. And so we start just by visually scanning our body, start at the chest, and torso, visually scan down, front, sides, and back of the body, then scan back up again. I'm going to tell you, it's better than yoga. By the end of the summer, I'm very, very flexible, and I feel like I've gotten a good physical workout. When you are in the woods or the fields, stay on the trails. Walk in the center of the trails, avoid the grassy edges. Now, I am sure I have some mushroom hunters in this audience, and just know that you are probably more likely to encounter ticks when you're out hunting mushrooms, and IDPH actually has a handout on that. Behavioral protection also extends to when you arrive back at home. When I come in from the field, whether for work or pleasure, I immediately, I go right to my dryer and take off my clothes and put them in the dryer for at least 10 minutes. If my clothes are damp, I'll put them in longer on high heat. And this is because heat, not water, heat kills ticks. I talked to people who said they removed ticks and then flushed them down the sink and then came into the bathroom an hour later and the tick had crawled back up out of the drain. So I typically, even if my clothes are dirty and stinky, I will dry them on high heat first and then I will wash them. You also want to check your gear and pets either before you enter the house or very soon after that. When you're coming back from outdoors, before you get in your car, you want to do a once over. There is research indicating that showering within 2 hours of coming indoors can help reduce the risk of acquiring a tick-borne disease. And I do shower, and when I do, before I get in, I take a look over my body, or if my husband's around, I'll have him help. I'll look at my children before I put them in. And then when I am in the shower, I also conduct a thorough tick check by feel. They're going to be attached only at one point. They're going to be attached to the mouth parts. And so if I run my fingers along areas where they might be likely to attach and I feel something flappy, I know it's not a mole. And this diagram here from the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Tick Lab, I like this diagram in particular amongst all the other ones on the internet, because this is one of the few diagrams that reminds people to check between their toes. I've talked to several people who have done their tick checks and they didn't look there, and a couple of days later they found a tick between their toes. And then the fourth arm of a tick bite risk reduction is landscape management. There's a lot of really good information on this. I'm not going to be able to cover all of it today, but I did just want to clue everybody in. A lot of this has come from work that's been done at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station. There are many different landscaping techniques you can use. You can use buffering borders of gravel rocks or wood chips between fields and recreational areas like playgrounds or gardens and wooded areas. You can reduce shady and damp areas. You can clear brush, rake leaves, remove leaf litter, remove plants that deer like, remove wood piles and rock walls. That's where the mice hosts can shelter. You can mow or use other means to keep trail sides clear of hanging grass. And use very active landscape design. Think about, is my landscape promoting or reducing tick encounters? And also use educational signs. And I'll point you to some resources for that at the end. And I just wanted to drop links here. If you can't get them off of the talk, email me and I'm happy to send you the slide. Chris, I can give you a copy too. All of these resources right here, it includes educational sites, it includes the Bible of tick landscape management that Kirby Stafford wrote, that's available for free at CDC. It is well worth a read if you're interested in ticks and landscaping. Now, another possibility, larger possibilities, for instance, controlling ticks on deer or fire. I'm not going to get into those today, although I do think that it would be a good topic for a talk in the future. So real quick, our active tick surveillance program. We have been going out around the state since 2018, collecting ticks, and then we bring them back to Champaign to our lab at the Illinois Natural History Survey, and we're testing these ticks per CDC protocol for disease agents. And we have a lot of stakeholders in the state. If you manage a natural area or park or a scout camp, you might be able to participate in our program. We train public health departments and tick collections. So essentially, this requires recruitment or coordination with public health and environmental conservation personnel around the state. The majority of the field collections are conducted by me and my crew at the INHS Medical Entomology Lab, but we also train people. I've got extensive training materials. I've got materials on how to keep yourself safe, materials on how to tick drag effectively, materials on how to make a cheap drag that doesn't require any sewing, and I can also provide supplies. And then we go into these hot sites of suspected tick, potential tick exposure, and we drag per CDC criteria. We bring those ticks back to the lab, or our stakeholders mail them to us. And then those ticks are identified by me or experts that I've trained, and then we test them for different disease agents. And then those results go up the chain to IDPH, and they report them on their map. And so Illinois finally has a statewide, state-funded, comprehensive active tick surveillance program. And we also have passive surveillance, I'll tell you about in a minute. And I said we send those data to IDPH. So we just updated IDPH, the folks at IDPH, the fantastic vector control folks there, just took some data and updated these maps as of February 17th of this year. So we've got pretty up-to-date data. You can go in, you can learn about 4 different tick species. You can click on different tabs for different disease agents. You can click on counties and see how many ticks we've tested from those counties for different disease agents and how many of those ticks were positive for them. And then the data go down the line to CDC as well. It's a bit hard to find the IDPH maps right now. I mean, this is a big website. They deal with a lot of communicable diseases. But if you go to the Illinois Natural History Survey Medical Entomology Lab's website, we have a tab dedicated to this. You can click over to the IDPH maps from there, or if you just do an internet search for Illinois tick maps, it'll probably pop up. And like I said, we train stakeholders in tick collection. So if there is somebody out there in the audience who's thinking they might be interested in this, I developed a drag. I call it the quick drag. You can make it for less than $20 in an afternoon at big box stores. You don't have to sew because nobody knows how to sew anymore. And then I can come train you in the field, and I can provide you with manuals. And then this is very new. I'll be presenting on this in about a month or so. We've got some really easy to use tick identification keys for people who are interested. And so basically, if somebody can follow my minimum collection procedures, they can send me ticks for free, and I'll identify them and test them for pathogens and then send you a site report. When it's reported at the IDPH map, it's anonymized at the county level. The site itself won't be reported there. All right, so what are we finding? Illinois has Amblyomma americanum, the Lone Star tick, and in general, it's moving south to north. Although it's probably a reinvasion of a habitat that it had been extirpated from in the past. It's probably not because of climate change. It's probably more because of regreening and proliferation of large tick hosts like deer and the loss of top-down predation. Then we've also got the Gulf Coast tick. This one, in some areas of Illinois, may have just been overlooked for a while because it looks very similar to the American dog tick that other people are familiar with. And in other areas, we might have a true invasion happening along the northern edge of the humid subtropical zone. We've got dog ticks everywhere. And black-legged ticks, which also I think any of these ticks could be encountered throughout the state. Gulf Coast, Lone Star tend to be more abundant down south. Black-legged tick tends to be more abundant up north, and it's north moving south probably. We might have some remnant populations down south or populations with different behaviors. So this is from those IDPH maps I told you about. And what you can see here is that the Lone Star tick, we're still nailing down seasonal activity, but in general, you could find one life stage or another between March and October. And all life stages of the Lone Star tick will bite people. Some people call it the turkey tick or turkey mite. I'm happy to have an argument about that afterwards if you want. Larvae can also be confused with chiggers. Now, we found Heartland virus in these ticks during our investigation in 2019, very far apart in Kankakee County and then down in Williamson, so 439 kilometers apart. Two folks had gotten sick, and so we went to the places where they thought they might have been bit and collected ticks and sent them to some folks at CDC because it was Heartland virus. It's very, very rare. It hasn't been found in many places yet. And the ticks did have it. So it's present here. We published on that. And if you want a copy of that publication, you can email me. Alpha-gal is new and weird. Alpha-gal syndrome is what it's technically called. The mammal meat allergy is what most people know it as. Allergists tend to be the most knowledgeable about this. Illinois is in the second highest percentile for human cases in the country. So we do have this in Illinois. I have a publication that just came out on this that I'm happy to share again if you want to email me. So it is an allergic reaction that usually starts about 4 to 6 weeks after the bite that caused it. And you have an allergic reaction to mammal meat. So that's your burger, hot dogs. But it's a delayed reaction. The symptoms usually happen 3 to 6 hours after eating the meat and can cause a range of symptoms. So sometimes it never moves beyond kind of vague abdominal distress like IBS. Sometimes it can lead to anaphylaxis and ER admissions and people have to carry EpiPens. There's not a lot that's known about it. There is online support groups and there is a human test available if you ask an allergist for a test. Amblyomma maculata, the Gulf Coast tick. So this one, unlike other species, it's not strongly tied to forests. Found in pastures, fallow fields, prairie grass, roadsides, trail sides, disturbed construction areas. It looks very similar to the American dog tick. If you look down in the lower right there, you'll see there are 3 Gulf Coast ticks and a dog tick down there. Now, it's typically adults that will bite people. And you're going to find them May to September. They like dogs a lot. It seems I get a lot of reports. A lot of our passive surveillance is of dogs. And we have recently established it in Illinois. And we've been finding a pathogen in it, a disease agent called Rickettsia parkeri. So we have not had any known human cases in Illinois to date. But the test for its close relative, for Rocky Mountain spotted fever, it only goes to Rickettsia. So people could have this and we wouldn't know. Now, the symptoms of Rickettsia parkeri Ricketsiosis are described in the medical literature as like RMSF, but milder and with an inoculation eschar. So that's a scab at the bite site. Which doesn't occur with Rocky Mountain spotted fever. If there is an infection, it can cause a positive RMSF test. Now we've tested 794 Gulf Coast ticks that we collected in Southern Illinois, and about 1 in 5 are infected with this agent. We've got a publication on it that I can share. We've also got a blog post about it that I can share if you reach out. So the American dog tick, Dermacentor variabilis, typically it's the adults that bite people. We do occasionally pick up nymphs on our drags, and they're usually active about April to August. Forest, trail sides, tall grasses, usually 40 meters into the forest or 40 meters into the field around the edge. And they're the vector of the disease agent that causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever. You know, the weird thing though is we've tested over 2,000 American dog ticks at this point, and we found the agent of Rocky Mountain spotted fever in 2 of them. We've had numerous reported cases of Rocky Mountain spotted fever in southern Illinois since 2000, and there was a really strong uptick in 2006. Now we know the Gulf Coast tick is moving north out of its historic range. We've documented 3 Rickettsia species in Illinois metastriate ticks, but the human test only goes to the genus, to Rickettsia species. So maybe some of what's being scored as Rocky Mountain spotted fever is actually due to a different spotted fever group, Rickettsiasis. And it's just going to take time to tease that all out. And again, I just want to emphasize they can appear very, very similar. So if you think you have found a Gulf Coast tick, head on over to our lab's website or reach out to me. We do passive tick identifications, and I'm happy to help. Finally, Ixodes scapularis, the black-legged tick, also known as the deer tick. You can encounter human biting stages throughout most of the year. Adults are active throughout the winter. Any day you've got a nice kind of sunny microclimate. I walked by frozen puddles in the early morning, and then I got up on a south-facing slope, and there were black-legged ticks active in the grass. Nymphs, which are considered the highest risk stage because they're easier to overlook during a tick check, are active now through August. They're really going to peak in late May through late June. They can transmit several disease agents and sometimes more than one disease agent in a single bite. These are the ones you really want to be careful about when you're doing that tick check, because they're smaller than the others. And we've got some strange pathogens we're picking up. One, Borrelia miyamotoi. If you go to that IDPH map, you'll be able to see where we found it. Well, we don't have any reported human cases in Illinois to date, but this pathogen causes symptoms similar to Lyme, but they're not associated with a rash. And it won't be detected if somebody does have an infection with this. It won't be detected on conventional FDA-approved Lyme tests. There are tests for it, but they're direct blood tests that go up to Mayo Clinic. There's strong evidence for maternal transmission to larvae. You don't usually see transmission of disease pathogens from mother ticks to through the eggs to the larvae. So it could mean that in some areas the pathogen could increase rapidly. It's previously been found in Illinois in one publication and a thesis. We've detected it in several counties in Illinois, as you can see on the map. And then also we're picking up Babesia microti. It was previously not considered present in ticks in Illinois until we started the surveillance program. We found it in about 2% of the black-legged ticks we've tested, and you can see those dark green counties there where we picked it up. It can be transmitted along with the Lyme agent and other agents in a single bite. This is known as a co-infection. And the reason I want to highlight it is that it's a protozoan parasite. The treatment for it is different than the treatment for Lyme. It requires antiparasitic drugs. And so in the medical literature, some doctors have noted that if a patient was treated for Lyme without significant improvement, then they tested for babesiosis after that. And then we do have a new invasive tick. It is not in Illinois yet, well, that it's been detected, but it's been spreading from the East Coast. It was detected in Missouri last summer, Hemophysalis longicornis. So far, it seems to be causing the most trouble in cattle. It has transmitted some disease agents to cattle in Virginia. And, you know, just in case ticks weren't terrifying enough, the females of this species can actually clone themselves. They don't need males to reproduce. And so they can reach very, very high numbers in highly local areas like a cattle pasture, potentially before you even know they're there. I think it's likely just a matter of time before it's found in Illinois, and it can be confused with other species, especially kennel ticks. So if you do think maybe you've encountered one, please contact me. I can give it an ID. Like I said, we do free tick identifications. If you go to our lab website, you'll find that we can do identifications from pictures. We can do identifications from ticks you send in, and all the instructions are located at our website. And you can also try identifying them yourself. We've got lots of pictures there, and pretty soon we're going to have some pretty outstanding tick identification keys. You can also upload pictures of ticks that you encounter to iNaturalist. We've got the Ticks of Illinois project up, and you can see the ticks that other people are finding in different parts of the state. And this is the big question I always get at the end of talks. How do you remove a tick, and then what do you do with that tick once it's removed? So the proper advice, technique is important here. The proper advice is to use fine tip forceps. I have used the forceps I use to tweeze my eyebrows. You can actually find forceps that are kind of made for this purpose of removing ticks. But you grasp that tick as close to the skin as possible. Ticks don't burrow into your skin. Ticks bite you, and then your skin swells up around them if you're having a reaction to it. So you can see that picture on the left there. Its mouth parts are firmly inserted into the skin. And so what you're trying to do is slide those tweezers, the tip of the tweezers, as close to the mouth parts as you possibly can. You might pinch your skin at first and pull up a bit of it. And then pull up with slow, steady pressure. And then according to CDC recommendations, disinfect, bite, and wash hands. And then what I do with ticks, when I remove a tick, is I write down where I think I got bit, how much time has elapsed since I found it, how long I think it might have been on, who it was on, whether it was me or one of my children, whether I traveled outside of the county in the last 10 days. CDC likes to get those data, and I've got all this information on our website. And then I take that note and the tick and put it in a bag and stick it in my freezer for a couple days. And then until I feel sure it's dead, until I feel sure it's frozen. It can take a little while for a tick to freeze. And then take it out and identify it. And there are lots of resources available for tick identifications, but like I said, if you head over to our lab website, you'll see we've got plenty, and we're happy to help. Knowing that tick identity can be helpful because, as you've seen in the talk, different tick species transmit different disease agents. And so just knowing that can be helpful. So I do always save any ticks that I encounter. I don't throw them away. I don't flush them down the toilet. I save them and I put them in my freezer, and hopefully I will just forget about them and never have to think about it again. But in case something comes up, I've got it. There are a lot of myths out there about what to do if you find an attached tick. So you don't burn it with a match. You don't smother it with petroleum jelly or liquid soap or kerosene. My personal favorite was steak. Somebody put steak on the ticks. Don't twist the tick when you're pulling it out. You just want to grasp it as close to the mouth parts as possible and just pull straight up. They've got barbed mouth parts like a fish hook. They're not spiraled in or anything. You're just ripping them out of the skin. You're just slowly ripping them out. Don't grasp the tick by the body. Again, you want to try to grasp it by as close to those mouth parts as possible, or with bare hands. Just try to cause minimal disturbance and get it out with slow, steady pressure clamped around the mouth parts. And I just want to key people into the fact the CDC has been updating a lot of the materials on their website lately about ticks and mosquitoes. If you head over to the CDC website, the page for tick-borne diseases, you'll see that they've now got a reference manual, a beautiful full color reference manual up for healthcare providers. They've got new informational fact sheets about ticks and Lyme disease, and they've even revised some of the information, such as now they are saying that untreated Lyme can be passed from a mother to a fetus during pregnancy. And they have updated some information on alpha-gal, saying that it's been, this mammal meat allergy has been reported among people who have been bitten by Lone Star ticks. And IDPH has resources too. Here's that handout I was talking about for mushroom hunters. That was made by the outstanding vector control folks up there. They've got handouts you can keep in an office or at a park. how to remove ticks and what to do. And then there's also signs. If you have a natural area, they have signs that you can get that you can put up there. So finally, before we head to questions, I just want to acknowledge everybody in our lab who have done just such an outstanding job the last 4 years. Tick work has been characterized, tick surveillance has been characterized as one of the worst jobs possible. I beg to differ, but every test we've run, and we've tested over 5,000 ticks at this point, that was somebody's sweat, sometimes their blood and tears that got it. And then we've got a fantastic molecular diagnostics lab as well. Some fantastic collaborators, Brian Allen at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I would strongly recommend you ask him to come give a talk on ticks and fire. He's done a lot of fantastic research on that. The Illinois Lyme Association, they've been doing a lot of hard work to try to raise awareness about ticks and tick-borne diseases in Illinois. And then the folks at IDPH, in particular Samantha Carr and April Holmes, they are the geniuses behind these maps. And they're also just a lot of fun to work with. And so with that, I am happy to get to some questions, and I can stay late, Chris, if you've got some time too.